Bosworth Kincaid's knuckles cracked against the weathered door of the Millerville train depot, each rep echoing his thundering heartbeat. At 6 feet 8 inches, he had to duck under the doorframe as he entered, his worn leather satchel clutching. A crumpled letter that had traveled 3 states to reach him. "You the mail order fellow?" The depot master barely glanced up from his ledger, tobacco juice staining his grizzled chin. "Bosworth Kincaid, sir. Here to meet Miss Cordelia Ashworth." A snort of laughter. "Good luck with that giant." She took one look at your description and caught the next eastbound train. "Left this for you." The rejection letter felt heavier than his blacksmith's hammer. Cordelia's delicate script spelled out his doom in flowery language. "Your excessive stature would make us incompatible in all domestic arrangements. I require a husband of more reasonable proportions." Bosworth crumpled the paper, his massive frame trembling with humiliation. 3 years of correspondence, 3 years of saving every penny from his forge to bring her west, all destroyed by genetics he couldn't control. "Ain't you gonna head back?" The depot master's voice carried cruel amusement. "Paid for a month's lodging. Might as well see what this territory offers." Truth was, Bosworth had burned his bridges in Missouri. His business partner had cheated him, his mother had passed, and creditors circled like vultures. Millerville represented his last hope for a fresh start, even without a bride. The boarding house sat at the edge of town, a 2-story structure that looked like it had weathered every storm since statehood. Mrs. Evangeline Rooker, the proprietress, barely reached his chest but possessed the commanding presence of a drill sergeant. "You're the mail order man," she declared, not a question. "Heard about your lady friend's hasty departure. Shame on her, I say. Nothing wrong with a man built for honest work." "Thank you, ma'am." Bosworth removed his hat, stooping slightly in. The narrow hallway. Rooms upstairs, second door. Mind the ceiling beams, they're lower than they appear. Supper's at 6 sharp. Don't be late. His room was sparse but clean, with a bed that would challenge even his engineering skills to accommodate his frame. Through the single window, he could see Millerville's main street, a handful of shops, a saloon, the church with its modest steeple, and beyond it all, endless prairie stretching to purple mountains. A knock interrupted his brooding. Mrs. Rooker's voice carried through the thin door. "Got someone here wants to meet you. Come down when you're presentable." Bosworth splashed water on his face, ran fingers through his dark hair, and descended the stairs with trepidation. Another rejection? More mockery? In the parlor stood a woman, unlike any he'd encountered. Tall herself, nearly 6 feet, with auburn hair pinned in a practical bun and hands that spoke of hard work. Her dress was simple homespun, but she wore it with quiet dignity. Most striking were her eyes, deep green like forest pools, holding intelligence and something else he couldn't name. "Mr. Kincaid," she said, her voice rich as honey. "I'm Isadora Fairmont. I heard about your situation. Thought you might appreciate a friendly welcome to our community." Isadora's handshake was firm, calloused palms meeting his with surprising strength. No delicate shrinking violet here, but a woman who understood work. "Miss Fairmont owns the largest ranch in 3 counties," Mrs. Rooker explained with obvious pride. "Lost her pa last winter. Been running it single-handed since." "My condolences," Bosworth said, meaning it. "Thank you. Papa always said the land doesn't mourn, it just needs tending." Isadora's pragmatic tone carried underlying grief. "I understand you're a blacksmith?" "Was. Still am, I suppose, though my forge is back in Missouri. Curious timing. Our smithy died of fever last month, left the whole territory without proper metalwork. Nearest replacement is 2 days' ride east." Hope flickered in Bosworth's chest like kindling catching flame. "You're suggesting I'm suggesting opportunity often wears work clothes. Isadora smiled, transforming her serious features. The shop's been sitting empty, tools gathering dust. Town needs a smith, and you need employment. Seems logical. Mrs. Rooker beamed. Told you this girl had more sense than most men twice her age. What about payment? I haven't much capital for rent or purchasing equipment. Work out payment later, Isadora waved dismissively. First priority is getting you established. Town. Council meets Thursday. I'll speak with Mayor Thornfield about the arrangement. Bosworth studied her face, searching for deception or pity. He found neither, only honest assessment of practical needs. Why help a stranger? Because Cordelia Ashworth's a fool. The words came out sharp, surprising them all. Isadora's cheeks reddened slightly. What I mean is, this community judges people by their character and contribution, not their physical dimensions. Amen to that, Mrs. Rooker muttered after Isadora left. Bosworth sat in his room puzzling over the encounter. The woman intrigued him, her confidence, her directness, the way she'd taken charge without making him feel diminished. So different from Cordelia's flowery letters filled with romantic notions but no substance. Thursday's town council meeting proved swift and decisive. Mayor Thornfield, a portly man with politician's charm, welcomed Bosworth enthusiastically once Isadora vouched for his skills. Temporary arrangement initially, the mayor explained. 3 months to prove yourself. If the work's satisfactory, we'll discuss permanent terms. The blacksmith shop sat on Main Street's eastern end, a solid stone building with good ventilation and adequate space. Previous owner had maintained the equipment well: anvil, forge, bellows, and basic tools all in working order. Bosworth's first customer arrived before he properly arranged his workspace. A rancher named Gideon Morse needing horseshoes for a remuda of mustangs. Heard we got ourselves a new smith, Morse said, eyeing Bosworth's height with curiosity rather than judgment. Hope you're better than old Henderson. Man couldn't shoe a wooden horse properly. By week's end, word had spread. Farmers brought plowshares for sharpening, ladies needed pots mended, and the general store required hardware repairs. Bosworth worked from dawn to dusk, muscles remembering familiar rhythms, confidence rebuilding with each completed job. Isadora stopped by regularly, sometimes with legitimate business. Her ranch consumed considerable metalwork, but often simply to check his progress. She'd lean against the doorframe, watching him work with those intelligent green eyes. You're gifted, she observed one afternoon as he shaped a complex bridle bit. Just experience. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the forge's heat. No, it's more than that. You understand the metal's nature. Work with it rather than against it. That's artistry. Their conversations revealed shared interests. Both loved reading, though books were scarce on the frontier. Both appreciated the land's harsh beauty. Both carried scars from past disappointments, but refused to let bitterness poison their futures. October brought the first hard frost and an unexpected challenge. Beauregard Whitmore rode into town like he owned it, leading a caravan of wagons and trailing dust clouds visible for miles. Whitmore was everything Bosworth wasn't average height, conventionally. Handsome, dressed in expensive Eastern clothes that screamed money and privilege. Heard this backwater needed civilizing, Whitmore announced at the saloon, voice carrying to every corner. Plan to establish proper businesses, bring real prosperity to Millerville. Within days, Whitmore had purchased the abandoned hotel, hired a dozen workers, and begun renovations that would transform the building into something approaching luxury. He also made no secret of his interest in Isadora Fairmont. Finest woman in the territory, he told anyone who'd listen. Deserves better than running cattle like some common cowhand. Lady of her quality needs proper society, refined company. Bosworth watched from his forge as Whitmore called on Isadora, bringing flowers, fancy chocolates, and promises of a sophisticated life back east. The man's persistence was matched only by his arrogance. "Don't look so worried," Mrs. Rooker advised during Sunday dinner. "Izzy's got more sense than to fall for that peacock's preening." But doubt nodded Bosworth. What could he offer compared to Whitmore's wealth and connections? A blacksmith's. Modest income versus unlimited luxury? His height, which had cost him one bride, now seemed even more inappropriate next to Whitmore's conventional attractiveness. The crisis came during Millerville's autumn social, held in the newly renovated hotel ballroom. Whitmore had spared no expense: crystal chandeliers, imported musicians, fine food that most locals had never tasted. The entire town attended, dressed in their Sunday finest. Bosworth almost stayed away. His formal clothes, though clean and pressed, couldn't compete with the elegance surrounding him. But Mrs. Rooker wouldn't hear of it. "You'll escort me," she declared. "About time these folks saw you cleaned up proper." The ballroom buzzed with excitement. Couples danced to waltz music while others sampled exotic delicacies from the buffet table. Whitmore held court near the punch bowl, regaling listeners with tales of his business successes. Isadora appeared like a vision in deep blue silk. Her auburn hair swept into an elegant arrangement that emphasized her graceful neck. She moved through the crowd with easy confidence, accepting compliments and dance invitations with practiced grace. "Miss Fairmont." Whitmore intercepted her path to the refreshment table. "You look absolutely radiant, like a queen among peasants." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, though I'd hardly call our neighbors peasants. Figure of speech, my dear. Though you must admit your beauty is rather wasted in these provincial surroundings." Bosworth watched from across the room, towering above the crowd like a mountain pine among saplings. Several people nodded friendly greetings, but he felt conspicuous, out of place among the refined festivities. When the musicians struck up a lively polka, Whitmore claimed Isadora's hand for the dance floor. They made a striking couple, he leading with practiced steps, she following gracefully, both drawing admiring glances from other guests. "Why don't you ask her?" Mrs. Rooker appeared at Bosworth's elbow. "Ask her what?" "To dance, you great ox. Woman's been looking your direction all evening. I'm not much of a dancer. Besides, look at them together. Natural partnership." "Pa, she's being polite, nothing more. Izzy's got no use for fancy dans who've never worked an honest day." As if to contradict her words, Whitmore spun Isadora expertly through a complex sequence that earned applause from watching couples. When the music ended, he bowed low over her hand, the picture of romantic chivalry. "Mr. Whitmore," Isadora said breathlessly, "you're quite accomplished." "Practice, my dear. In proper society, such skills are essential. Perhaps you'd honor me with the next dance as well?" Before Isadora could answer, the hotel's front doors burst open with enough force to rattle the crystal chandeliers. 3 men stumbled inside, faces flushed with whiskey and violence, led by a familiar figure that made Bosworth's blood run cold. "Well, well," drawled Crassus Muldoon, Bosworth's former business partner from Missouri. "Heard there was a party in this godforsaken hole. Thought we'd invite ourselves." Muldoon's companions, hired guns by the look of them, flanked him like wolves hunting in pack formation. The music died as dancers froze mid-step, sensing danger. "Gentlemen," Mayor Thornfield stepped forward nervously, "this is a private function." "Private?" Muldoon's laugh held no humor. "Nothing private about it when my old partner's here enjoying himself while owing me considerable money." All eyes turned to Bosworth, who stepped from the crowd shelter with grim resignation. He'd known this confrontation was inevitable. "Muldoon." His voice carried across the silent ballroom. "Didn't expect to see you this far west. Surprising what a man will do to collect his due. You left Missouri owing me $3,000, Kincaid. Interest has been accumulating. I owed you nothing. You cheated me out of my share, remember? Your word against mine. And you ain't here to dispute it anymore, are you? Whitmore pushed forward, chest puffed with indignation. See here, you ruffians can't simply burst into a civilized gathering. Muldoon's backhand caught Whitmore across the mouth, sending him sprawling into the punch table. Crystal shattered as the fancy Easterner crumpled among the wreckage, his expensive suit stained with red liquid. Anyone else want to play hero? Muldoon's hand rested on his gun butt. The room held collective breath. These weren't local troublemakers who could be reasoned with. They were hardened men accustomed to violence, following their own brutal code. Leave these people alone, Bosworth said quietly. Your quarrel's with me. Damn right it is. 3,000 plus interest makes 4,000 even. You got that kind of money, Giant? You know, I don't. Then we got ourselves a problem. Muldoon's smile was cruel. Course I'm a reasonable man. Might consider alternative payment. His gaze swept the room and settled on Isadora, who stood frozen near the overturned refreshment table. The predatory hunger in his eyes made his intentions clear. Pretty lady like that might be worth considerable entertainment value. Rage exploded through Bosworth's chest like molten metal. His massive frame coiled with deadly intent as he took a step forward. Touch her and I'll kill you. Big words from a man who ran away rather than face his obligations. But Muldoon's companions had shifted position, hands moving closer to their weapons. The standoff stretched taut as piano wire. Women pressed hands to mouths in terror while men calculated odds and distances. Violence hung in the air like smoke from the forge. Then Isadora stepped forward. How much? She asked calmly. Izzy, no? Bosworth started. How much money are we discussing? She repeated, ignoring his protest. Muldoon's eyebrows rose. Well now, lady's got spine. $4,000, cash money. I'll write you a bank draft. The offer stunned everyone present. $4,000 represented a fortune in Millerville, more than most families earned in 5 years. Isadora, you can't. I can and I will. Her green eyes blazed with determination. Mr. Muldoon, do we have an agreement? Lady, I don't know you from Adam's cat. Bank draft ain't worth the paper unless I know you're good for it. Mayor Thornfield cleared his throat shakily. Miss Fairmont owns the largest ranch in 3 counties. Her credit is beyond question. That so? Muldoon studied Isadora with new interest. You'd pay a stranger's debts? What's this giant to you? He's... Isadora paused, her gaze finding Bosworth across the room. He's the finest man I've ever known. The words hit Bosworth like a physical blow, stealing breath from his lungs. Around them, the ballroom remained frozen and Tableau Whitmore groaning among broken crystal. Townspeople pressed against the walls in fear, and Muldoon's predatory smile growing wider. Finest man, is he? Muldoon chuckled. Lady, you don't know this particular specimen very well. See, our Bosworth here ain't just a debtor. He's a coward who ran rather than face consequences. That's enough. Isadora's voice cut like steel. I'll have the bank draft ready tomorrow morning. You can collect your money and leave our town. Now hold on, Muldoon raised a hand. Might be I'm not ready to settle for mere money anymore. See, this situation's got interesting possibilities. His gaze traveled between Isadora and Bosworth with calculating malice. Lady's willing to pay a stranger's debts. Man's ready to fight for her honor. Sounds like there's feelings involved. Bosworth's massive hands clenched into fists. State your terms, Muldoon. Simple proposition. You and me, bare knuckles, winner take all. I win. I collect my money plus interest, and the lady's companionship for a week. You win, debts forgiven, and we ride out peaceful. Absolutely not. Isadora stepped between them. I won't be wagered like a poker chip. Your choice, miss. But if Giant Boy here won't fight for you proper, maybe you ain't worth defending. The psychological trap was masterful. Muldoon knew exactly which strings to pull. Bosworth's pride, Isadora's independence, the crowd's expectations of masculine behavior. Refuse the challenge and appear cowardly. Accept it and risk Isadora's safety on the outcome of brutal violence. Bosworth, Isadora whispered, don't let him manipulate you. But the damage was done. Every man in the room understood the unspoken code. When a woman's honor was threatened, a real man fought regardless of consequences. One condition, Bosworth said quietly. This ends here, win or lose. No further claims, no return visits. Agreed. Though I'm gonna enjoy teaching you some manners. The crowd pushed back chairs and tables, creating a makeshift fighting circle in the center of the ballroom. Muldoon stripped to his shirt sleeves, revealing a wiry frame marked by old scars, evidence of previous conflicts. Bosworth removed his coat slowly, aware of Isadora's eyes upon him. At full height, he dwarfed his opponent by nearly a foot, but Muldoon carried himself with a fighter's confidence. Last chance to back down, Giant. Not happening. They circled each other like predators, testing distance and timing. Muldoon moved with quick, nervous energy while Bosworth advanced with deliberate caution, understanding that his reach advantage was offset by the other man's speed. Muldoon struck first, a lightning jab aimed at Bosworth's jaw. The bigger man swayed back, feeling knuckles whistle past his chin, then countered with a thunderous right hand that Muldoon barely avoided. The crowd pressed closer, drawn by the primal drama of physical combat. Ladies gasped at each exchange, while men offered shouted advice and encouragement. For several minutes they traded blows. Muldoon darting in with quick combinations, Bosworth landing heavier but less frequent strikes. Blood appeared on both faces as the fight intensified. Then Muldoon changed tactics. Instead of standing toe-to-toe, he began targeting Bosworth's legs, trying to chop down the bigger man like a lumberjack felling timber. A vicious kick to the knee sent Bosworth staggering, and Muldoon pressed his advantage with a flurry of body shots. Getting tired, Giant? Maybe you should stick to shoeing horses. Bosworth absorbed the punishment stoically, but his movements were slowing. Muldoon sensed victory and became reckless, loading up for a knockout punch. The haymaker never landed. Bosworth caught his opponent's wrist mid-swing and, using Muldoon's own momentum, threw him bodily across the improvised ring. The smaller man crashed into a table with sickening impact, but Muldoon wasn't finished. As Bosworth approached, thinking the fight over, his opponent produced a knife from his boot, a wicked blade that gleamed under the chandelier's light. Never was much for fair fights, Muldoon snarled, steel weaving hypnotic patterns in the air. The appearance of the knife changed everything. What had been brutal but honorable combat became a life-or-death struggle, and the crowd's excitement turned to horror. "Murderer!" Mayor Thornfield shouted. This was to be bare knuckles. Plans change. Muldoon circled like a stalking cat, blade extended. Giant's been asking for this since Missouri. Bosworth retreated carefully, seeking anything that might serve as a weapon. His hands found a heavy silver candlestick from the refreshment table. Not ideal, but better than nothing. They engaged in deadly dance, Muldoon's knife slashing in vicious arcs while Bosworth parried desperately with his makeshift weapon. Smaller man possessed skills earned in a dozen back-alley brawls, each movement economical and lethal. A feint toward Bosworth's chest became a thrust at his ribs. The blade sliced through fabric and flesh, drawing a line of crimson across his side. Pain flared, but he fought through it, bringing the candlestick down in a crushing blow that Muldoon barely evaded. "First blood to me," Muldoon taunted. "How?" "Many cuts before you fall, giant." The psychological warfare was as dangerous as the physical attacks. Muldoon sought to undermine his opponent's confidence while pressing his advantage with calculated brutality. But anger was building in Bosworth's chest, not wild rage, but cold, focused fury. This man threatened not just his life, but Isadora's safety, the new life he'd begun building in Millerville, the chance of happiness he'd never dared hope for. When Muldoon lunged again, Bosworth was ready. Instead of retreating, he stepped inside the arc of the blade, accepting a shallow cut across his forearm in exchange for a crushing grip on his opponent's wrist. "My turn," he growled. What followed wasn't pretty. Bosworth's superior size and strength told quickly once he eliminated Muldoon's speed advantage. He twisted the knife from nerveless fingers, then delivered a series of devastating blows that left his opponent broken and gasping on the polished floor. The fight was over, but the confrontation wasn't. "Kill him," Muldoon's companions had drawn, their guns unwilling to accept their leader's defeat. Kill them all if necessary. 2 weapons against a roomful of unarmed civilians, the mathematics were simple and deadly. Bosworth stepped protectively in front of Isadora, knowing his body could absorb bullets meant for her, but unable to stop them all. Then the ballroom doors exploded inward again, this time admitting Sheriff Cornelius Dunn and 3 deputies, all carrying shotguns with purposeful intent. "Gentlemen," the sheriff's voice was deceptively mild, "I believe you're trespassing." "This ain't your business, lawman." "Threatening citizens in my jurisdiction makes it very much my business. Now, you can drop those weapons peaceful-like, or we can discuss the matter more forcefully." The standoff lasted perhaps 10 seconds long, enough for the gunman to calculate odds and decide discretion trumped valor. Weapons clattered to the floor as hands rose in surrender. "Smart choice." Sheriff Dunn nodded approvingly. "Boys, escort these gentlemen to the jail. We'll sort out charges tomorrow." As the prisoners were led away, Muldoon managed one final threat. "This ain't over, Kincaid." "I got friends. You had friends," the sheriff corrected. "Now you got a cell and a date with the circuit judge." "I'd worry more about the hangman than revenge, were I you." The crowd began dispersing, excitement giving way to exhaustion and relief. Women fussed over minor injuries while men rehashed the fight with growing embellishment. Bosworth slumped against the wall, adrenaline fading too. "Leave him shaky and nauseated." The knife wounds burned like forged fire, and his knuckles were raw from impact. "Let me see those cuts." Isadora was suddenly beside him, her hands gentle but competent as they examined his injuries. "I'm fine. You're bleeding." "Don't be stubborn." She produced a handkerchief, pressing it against the worst gash. "These need proper cleaning and bandaging." Her touch was soft, caring, and for a moment the chaos around them faded to insignificance. They stood close together in their private bubble, her green eyes reflecting concern and something deeper. "Why?" Bosworth asked quietly. "Why what?" "Why? Were you willing to pay my debts? Why risk everything for someone like me?" Isadora's hands stilled in their ministrations. When she looked up at him, her gaze was steady and sure. "Because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, Bosworth. Kincaid. And love doesn't calculate costs." The words hung between them like morning mist over the prairie, beautiful and fragile. Bosworth stared down at her upturned face, scarcely daring to believe what he'd heard. "You love me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "With all my heart." Isadora's smile was radiant. "Did you think I spent all those afternoons at your forge merely to discuss metalwork?" Around them, the ballroom buzzed with cleanup activity as townspeople righted overturned furniture and swept up broken crystal. but their little corner remained an island of intimacy amid the chaos. I thought you were just being kind. Helping. A stranger get established? Bosworth's massive hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. I never dared hope that someone like you could care for someone like me. Someone like you? Isadora's eyebrows rose. You mean honest, hard-working, brave enough to face down armed thugs for others' safety? What's not to love? I'm too tall, too awkward too. She silenced him with a kiss that tasted of champagne and promises. When they separated, her eyes sparkled with mischief. Bosworth Kincaid, if you're too tall, then I'm too independent. If you're too awkward, then I'm too outspoken. Seems to me we're perfectly matched in our imperfections. Across the room, Whitmore struggled to his feet amid the wreckage of the refreshment table, his fine clothes stained and dignity thoroughly battered. He caught sight of their embrace and his face contorted with bitter envy. Miss Fairmont, he called out, voice cracking slightly. Surely you can't be serious about that ... That oversized laborer. I offered you culture, sophistication, a place in proper society. Isadora turned toward him without releasing Bosworth's hand. Mr. Whitmore, you offered me everything except what I actually wanted, a man who sees me as an equal partner rather than a decorative acquisition. But he's a common blacksmith. Yes, she agreed, pride ringing in her voice. He's a craftsman who creates useful things with his own hands. He builds rather than merely consuming what others produce. And he's twice the man you'll ever be. Whitmore's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish as he struggled to find some response to such decisive rejection. Finally, dignity in tatters, he stalked toward the door. You'll regret this decision, Miss Fairmont. When novelty wears off and you're tired of living like a common laborer's wife, remember what you threw away. I'll remember a pompous fool who mistook arrogance for attractiveness. She called after his retreating figure. The door slammed with petulant force, leaving Whitmore's promised civilization behind like discarded wrapping paper. Mrs. Rooker appeared at their side, beaming with satisfaction. About time you two came to your senses. Been obvious for weeks that you were smitten with each other. That obvious? Bosworth asked, embarrassed. Clear as spring water to anyone with functioning eyes. Now, let's get those cuts properly tended, before you bleed all over my clean floors. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, autumn painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Bosworth stood in his forged doorway, watching Millerville come alive with another day's purposeful activity. His wounds ached but were healing cleanly thanks to Isadora's careful nursing. More importantly, the weight he'd carried for months, fear of discovery, shame over past failures, loneliness that had haunted his nights, all of it had lifted like smoke dispersing in clean air. Admiring your kingdom? Isadora approached leading her favorite mare, dressed for riding in practical leather and denim. Just thinking how different everything looks now. Different how? Like home. He turned to face her, still marveling that this remarkable woman had chosen him. Isadora, I need to ask you something important. Ask away. Will you marry me? She pretended to consider seriously, tapping one finger against her lips in mock deliberation. Well, you're reasonably handsome, adequately employed, and you fight off villains quite competently. Is that a yes? That's a yes, you wonderful giant. She launched herself into his arms, laughing as he spun her around despite his injuries. Though I should warn you, I come with a rather large ranch that needs managing. I think I can handle the work. And I'm told I can be quite demanding. I'll manage. And I have absolutely no intention of being a proper submissive wife who defers to her husband's judgment in all things. Thank God for that, Bosworth murmured against her hair. Life with a proper wife would bore me senseless. 6 months. Later, on a perfect spring morning when the prairie bloomed with wildflowers and possibility, Bosworth Kincaid married Isadora Fairmont in Millerville's little church. The bride wore her mother's dress, altered to accommodate her statuesque frame, while the groom had to duck under decorative archways and accept good-natured jokes about finding a stepladder for the ceremony. Their first dance as husband and wife took place in the same hotel ballroom where they'd nearly lost everything to Muldoon's greed. But this time, no interruptions marred the celebration. They moved together with natural grace, she tall enough to rest her head on his shoulder, gentle enough to make her feel cherished rather than overwhelmed. "Any regrets?" Isadora whispered as they swayed to the music. "Only one," Bosworth replied, his voice warm with contentment. "What's that?" "I should have thanked Cordelia Ashworth for running away. Best thing that ever happened to me." Isadora's laugh was pure joy, a sound that would echo through their long, happy life together in the wild territory that had given them both exactly what they never knew they were looking for: true love that saw past surface imperfections to the perfect match of souls beneath.